Johnny Cash, you still got the pipes, but you're not wearing black today.
Kind of overwhelmed.
Johnny Cash is often described as more legend than man, a towering figure who seemed to transcend the very boundaries of country music. Fans see him as a rebel in black, yet he also radiated compassion for the poor and the forgotten. Dig deeper, and you'll uncover episodes so outlandish they almost sound invented, like the claim that, during his Air Force service, he intercepted the Morse code message announcing Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin's death. That astonishing tale is just one puzzle piece in a life marked by extremes, from triumphant prison concerts to humiliating stints behind bars himself. In every chapter, Cash balanced a deep devotion to faith with an outlaw's flair for chaos, leading to a legacy that continues to fascinate. Born as J.R. Cash on February 26, 1932, he came into a world battered by the Great Depression. His family toiled on government-allocated farmland in Dyess, Arkansas, striving to rise above dire poverty. Day after day, the young Cash found solace in humming gospel tunes while chopping cotton under the merciless sun. This grueling routine planted a lasting empathy in him, shaping how he saw the world. He understood hardship, and it filtered into his music as soon as he learned his first chords on a battered guitar. Music became more than a pastime. It was a lifeline. Even as a child, he recognized that songs carried truths capable of cutting through despair. That sense of purpose drove him when he enlisted in the Air Force at 18, searching for a bigger destiny than what Dyess could offer. Military life jolted him into a strict routine. After basic training in San Antonio, he was stationed in Landsberg, West Germany, amid the rising tensions of the Cold War. The Air Force quickly spotted his knack for untangling muddled audio, so they assigned him to intercept Soviet communications via Morse code. This role came with top-secret clearance and almost no personal freedom. Phone calls home were a rarity. He faced strict limits on where he could go or whom he could visit. Yet the isolation spurred his creativity. He scraped together money to buy a guitar at the bass store and spent free evenings writing songs. Some of his peers recall him as the quiet guy with a restless glint in his eyes, strumming and scribbling lyrics whenever duty allowed. Then came the fateful day, March 5, 1953. While manning his post, Cash reportedly picked up a coded signal that Stalin had died. Debate still rages about whether he single-handedly deciphered the news, but he always maintained that he was the first American to discover the dictator's passing. Even if he was part of a larger team, the notion of the future man in black learning of Stalin's death before anyone in Washington adds a surreal layer to his already storied life. Perhaps his remarkable ear for patterns helped him identify something that others might have missed. That uncanny fusion of discipline and audacity foreshadowed the unpredictable career he'd build after returning home. Once discharged, he married Vivian Liberto, his sweetheart from Texas, and relocated to Memphis. There he juggled odd jobs, selling appliances by day and chasing a dream of stardom by night. He pestered Sam Phillips at Sun Records with relentless determination. One audition was all it took for Phillips to sense the spark in Cash's voice, a blend of raw country, gospel undertones, and an edgy rockabilly pulse. Early singles like Cry, 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 and Hey Porter put him on the map, but Folsom Prison Blues became his defining anthem. Listeners were electrified by its haunting depiction of life behind bars, so vivid that many assumed Cash had served hard time. In reality, his inspiration came from the film Inside the Walls of Folsom Prison, which he'd seen in Germany. That imagery, coupled with the loneliness he'd tasted on the Air Force base, lent his words a frightening authenticity. As applause and record sales multiplied, so did whispers of trouble. Cash was rumored to be battling substance problems, a habit that made him miss shows or behave erratically. He garnered headlines when he was arrested at the Mexican border in 1965, caught smuggling pills inside his guitar case. Though they were technically prescription meds, the media fueled the idea that he was a reckless outlaw. His misadventures also included setting fire to parts of Los Padres National Forest, killing endangered condors, and prompting a federal lawsuit. These scandals only amplified his rebellious persona in the public eye. Fans saw an artist who lived on the edge, openly grappling with sin and salvation. Critics questioned whether he would derail entirely, but even at his lowest, he never lost sight of humanity's struggles. That devotion to the underdog crystallized in his prison concerts. Long before the celebrated 1968 and 1969 live albums from Folsom and San Quentin, he played to inmates in lesser-known performances across the country. The concept baffled promoters. Why waste time entertaining criminals? For Cash, the answer was obvious. These men, locked away from society, needed hope more than most. Perhaps he recalled his own enforced solitude in West Germany, or perhaps empathy simply ran in his veins. Whatever the root cause, he stood on stages few dared tread and sang his heart out. The inmates roared back with gratitude, forging an emotional bond that resonated with the public once news trickled out. Those prison performances became central to his myth, a testament to how seriously he took that moral obligation to speak up for lost souls. Behind the scenes, his private life was in shambles. Married to Vivian, he found it challenging to balance a skyrocketing career and family responsibilities. Rumors of flirtations and unprofessional behavior flooded gossip columns, especially regarding June Carter, who performed alongside him. Eventually, Cash's marriage to Vivian collapsed. He and June married in 1968, sparking both admiration and backlash. June Carter, a member of country music's Royal Carter family, matched Cash's intensity on stage, countering his brooding presence with witty banter and glowing smiles. They duetted on hits like Jackson, charming audiences everywhere. Fans regarded their relationship as redemptive, a partnership strong enough to quell his destructive impulses. Still, tales of relapses surfaced periodically, reminding people that no romance could magically erase inner turmoil. Yet Johnny Cash never wavered in his stance on injustice. Over time, he adopted the man in black image as a symbol of solidarity. While some insisted it was a marketing ploy, he explained that he wore black to mourn the downtrodden, the poor, the hungry, prisoners, and soldiers fighting faraway wars. Media skeptics rolled their eyes, but every time he repeated his reasons, he did so with genuine conviction. That passion for defending the underprivileged put him at odds with certain officials who preferred to ignore conditions in jails or reservations. It also perplexed some fans who thought a patriotic, Bible-believing singer shouldn't question authority. Cash, however, refused to conform to any single mold. He loved his country, but despised the arrogance that often underpinned policy decisions, especially those marginalizing the helpless. That duality, devout Christian patriot versus outspoken critic, remains one of the most compelling aspects of his legacy. By the late 1960s, his star was ascendant, but personal crises remained. Substance use led to erratic behavior, and at times, people feared he might OD or wind up languishing in legal trouble. In one instance, he was caught trespassing late at night while allegedly picking flowers in somebody's yard, an absurd act that further fueled negative press. Through it all, he kept turning out music, embodying both a cautionary tale and a beacon of faith. His TV variety show in the early 1970s underscored his broad appeal, featuring duets with rock and folk icons, bridging generational and cultural divides. At a moment when America was deeply polarized, Cash became a unifying force, refusing to demonize those who disagreed with him. Eventually, the hits slowed. Newer styles of country music took center stage, and radio formats pushed him aside. Some joked that the man in black had gone gray and lost his way. Cash's record labels tried polishing his sound, dulling the raw edge that defined him. Album sales faltered, and many wrote him off as a legend whose best years had slipped away. But then, in the 1990s, he shocked everyone by collaborating with Rick Rubin, a producer famous for working with heavy metal and hip-hop acts. Rubin stripped away the glitzy backup instruments, leaving only Cash's voice and a guitar. Released in 1994, American Recordings reignited his career, captivating a younger audience that found honesty in his ragged baritone. Critics marveled at how timeless he sounded, describing the album as a stark confessional from a man who'd lived 1,000 lives. A series of subsequent American albums followed, intensifying this wave of late-career acclaim. Cash covered songs by contemporary artists, forging a musical bridge that transcended age or genre. Tracks like his haunting version of 9 Inch Nails' Hurt laid bare his frailties, winning him new fans who realized that vulnerability, when delivered with sincerity, could be incredibly powerful. Yet even as his art soared, his health deteriorated. Diabetes, among other ailments, forced him to limit touring, and his public appearances grew sporadic. June Carter became his rock during these difficulties, though she too faced health challenges. Their devotion resonated deeply with fans, especially when June passed away in May 2003, leaving Cash visibly bereft. He followed her in death just 4 months later, ending one of country music's most legendary love stories. In the wake of his passing, the world reevaluated his life and work. Debates flared up again about that day in Germany. Could one young airman really intercept the news of Stalin's death alone? Was it a group triumph with multiple operators? Maybe nobody will ever know the full details. But the fact that people are still drawn to that mystery speaks volumes. Johnny Cash's life was punctuated by dramatic moments that defied reason, from playing crucial roles in Cold War intelligence to revitalizing prison reform with the power of music. In each phase, he came across as both flawed and unwavering, showing a rare willingness to expose his weaknesses in order to stand for others. His affection for prisons never faded. He continued those shows in out-of-the-way facilities, often without fanfare, long after the spotlight moved on. He believed that punishing prisoners without offering hope was a moral failing. Even as new controversies erupted, some claimed he was meddling in political matters. He stuck to his guns. In a system that relished easy labels, Cash insisted on nuances, encouraging people to see inmates as human beings. It wasn't a popular stance, but popularity mattered less to him than living by the convictions he'd honed since childhood. Another important cause was his advocacy for Native Americans, showcased on his album Bitter Tears in 1964. Radio stations boycotted it, disliking the criticism of how indigenous communities had been treated. Cash paid out of pocket to promote it, undeterred by negative reactions. This pattern repeated throughout his career. Each time the industry or the public demanded that he play it safe, he doubled down on social or spiritual messages that could alienate fair-weather fans. The same defiance that once got him into legal tangles fueled his moral courage. Even when critics rolled their eyes, he pressed on, inspiring generations of artists who hoped to blend music with a higher calling. That unwavering stance is precisely why politicians of various stripes still invoke his name, each attempting to claim a piece of his legacy. Conservatives highlight his military background and religious fervor. Liberals admire his prison advocacy and empathy for the marginalized. Cash, however, belonged to no faction. His life story, from intercepting Soviet secrets to forging alliances with rebellious rock figures, was too broad and contradictory to fit neatly under any banner. In the final years, as the American albums earned him Grammys and fresh accolades, he laid bare his journey in songs that sounded at once world-weary and hopeful. Even though disease ravaged his body, he recorded until his last months. The rawness of that work, poignant covers, confessions of fear, meditations on life and faith, cemented him as a colossal figure whose influence crossed every boundary. When he sang of sorrow, you believed he'd lived it. When he reached for redemption, you believed it might be possible for everyone. So how do we sum up Johnny Cash? Was he the tragic misfit who kept stumbling into trouble, or the righteous crusader who championed underdogs? Perhaps he was both, shaped by a paradoxical blend of sin and salvation, he walked through life wearing black, both as a funeral shroud for societal failures and a daily reminder that suffering lurked everywhere. Whether at a top-secret radio post in Germany, a raucous stage at Folsom Prison, or a stripped-down recording booth with Rick Rubin, he met each moment with undeniable passion. The Stalin transmission myth remains a fitting symbol for the man in black, an improbable intersection between backwoods Americana and the high-stakes theater of global politics. If he did intercept the news first, it's one of many unlikely feats. If he embellished, well, it wouldn't be the only tall tale swirling around him. But in a sense, that detail pales next to the broader truths of his life. He rescued entire segments of America's neglected population from silence, offered second chances to those many deemed beyond saving, and refused to be tamed by the constraints of the music industry or the demands of the public. Years after his death, new listeners keep discovering the austere brilliance of his later recordings, along with the primal vigor of his earliest hits. They find a towering presence who bridged generational gaps and cultural chasms, forging unity through a simple combination of chords and conviction. His story invites believers and skeptics alike to imagine that flaws can coexist with greatness, that we can stumble in darkness yet still sing about the light. Each retelling of his exploits, from those border arrests to the improbable prison shows, paints a portrait of a man who believed redemption was real, whether for criminals, drug addicts, or broken hearts. Johnny Cash remains one of the few artists who genuinely belong to the entire spectrum of America, and well beyond. Critics may debate certain details, but nobody denies the epic scope of his impact. He was a patriot without being a puppet, a devout believer unafraid to question authority, and a restless rebel who bowed his head in prayer. If you listen closely to his songs, you'll sense that spark of empathy that first flickered in the Arkansas fields, then flared brighter in the lonely hush of a German radio room, and ultimately blazed across every prison yard he visited. He was, and will always be, the man in black, flawed but fearless, brimming with humanity, impossible to contain within any single narrative. In an era saturated with disposable fame, Johnny Cash endures because he laid bare his soul in every note. People still see themselves in his struggles, a reminder that darkness doesn't rule out hope. Whether he truly decoded a death that rocked the world or simply contributed to the chain of information that changed history, it fits the timeless enigma he represents. He walked the line between darkness and redemption, sang for those confined by their circumstances, and never hesitated to walk into places where others feared to go. That is why, long after he and June Carter have taken their final bows, his voice echoes on, a testament that real empathy can prevail over despair and that the humblest beginnings can spawn the mightiest legacies. Even after his passing, controversies linger. Some wonder if stories about his arrests were exaggerated, or if his relationship with June truly began earlier than claimed. Others debate his political leanings, attempting to label him as staunchly conservative or resolutely liberal. But Johnny Cash never fit neatly into anyone's box. His own words, interviews, and songs reveal a man guided by compassion and conviction, not ideology. He championed prison reform because he felt a moral imperative to care for those society discarded. He wore black because it symbolized grief for the suffering and the neglected. And when his voice shook with pain or soared in triumph, it told the unvarnished truth of a life wrestling with darkness at every turn. If he stretched facts here and there, it only added to a sprawling tapestry that taught us it's possible to break barriers, battle demons, and still sing your truth to anyone willing to listen. That is the legacy of Johnny Cash, the codebreaker, the rabble-rouser, the heartbroken romantic, the man who never stopped fighting for redemption, his own and the world's. He remains an American treasure who proved that truth transcends legend. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.